welcome to this panel on the future of investing in healthcare post-COVID. I'm Amy Lewin, I'm Deputy Editor of Sifted, which is an FT-backed online publication which covers startups and tech in Europe. You can follow us at www.sifted.eu and sign up to our newsletter where we write a lot about many topics about startups in Europe, including often health tech. Joining me today to talk about this subject, I have Noor, who's a partner at Global Ventures, which is a VC firm based in the UAE, which focuses on growth stage companies in emerging markets. And I also have Dmitry, who's managing partner of Deep Knowledge Ventures, which is an investment fund focused on deep tech and advanced science. So the reason we're talking about healthcare today is obviously lockdowns around the world have kind of forced this crazy experiment in digital health. GPs are running remote consultations, many of them for the first time. Digital health tracking is receiving attention from everyone, and kind of different tools for medics are also taking off. That's accelerating a trend that was around anyway. In 2019, investment into digital health globally hit 7.5 billion, and in 2018 it was a tiny bit higher, 8.1 billion, which is a massive increase over the past few years. But the question we're talking about today is kind of what happens next. So we've had this big experiment, people have kind of adopted digital health like never before, both professionally and kind of on the consumer, the everyday person side. But is it going to stick, or are we all going to kind of go back to the way we were before when a vaccine comes, or when the world returns to normal, if it ever does? And also, what does that mean for investment? So to crack on with our questions, health tech's really in vogue. Investors are more interested in it than ever. When I'm speaking to VCs, a lot of them are suddenly health tech is one of their areas of interest. But is it actually more enticing? No, or do actually a lot of the kind of challenges that have been around for ages remain? Talk us through kind of how you see things panning out a bit.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you for having me here. We think about digital health and health tech as an industry that's hit an inflection point very suddenly, largely due to the pandemic and due to COVID. There's three key factors here that have accelerated adoption. The first is that the regulator in most markets, and mainly emerging markets where we operate, has historically thought that this is something that's nice to have but not necessary, and been shy to regulate, and therefore it was difficult for companies to grow and scale. All of a sudden you have regulators saying, actually, we really want this. This is a solution that we're embracing, and here's the regulation around it. And so, investors and entrepreneurs can get behind that and start building their companies faster, better, because it's being regulated. The other part of the puzzle is the insurance and the payers. So historically, payers have also said, well, we're not sure, we don't know, does this work? Suddenly, insurance, payers are saying, yes, please use digital health and a teledoctor rather than going to see your GP. And if something's really wrong, then go see your GP. And the last part, and the most important part, is the patient. So again, 6 months ago, people would rather go see a doctor in person. Now, many people would rather have a teledoctor. And so when we see these three things come together, you've had an inflection point. And in emerging markets specifically, it's not that we're replacing the doctor or the GP, it's that people don't have access to start with. So when we start to take a look at our space, we have 1.2 doctors per 1,000 people. In the OECD countries and developed markets, you have 4.8. So we have 4 times less doctors per person in the Middle East and Africa where we operate. So when you think about that, it's not that we're saying, well, we don't need the hospitals and the doctors as much anymore. It's saying for the billion people that don't have access to a physician, you now have one. You're augmenting the current supply. You're not trying to replace it. So that's how it's different in our part of the world. But in general, it is an inflection point, and we don't think that the regulator, the payer, the insurer, or the patient will ever go back to saying, actually, we don't want this. So we think it's a permanent shift in behavior.
Okay, and Dmitry, does that kind of correlate to what you've been seeing?
Yes, in general, of course, I agree. Also, probably many investors are now aware that on the background to this great market crash in most of the industries, particularly biotech industry is on the rise. So this year, despite all these challenges and issues, the size of the deals is actually growing, and many startups in biotech, in drug discovery, so they're enjoying actually the rise of investment rounds. And in particular, we do see very significant growth in artificial intelligence for drug discovery sector, and plus to that, companies which are capable to provide some techniques and data science advancements towards biomarker development, and early stage detection of different problems which might lead to decline of immune system, and vice versa, some techniques which can increase immune system, which is actually the most efficient tool to protect from virus and pandemics, not only this particular but also in the future. So that's why in general I think this biotech industry, health tech industry, it's actually are now having quite great opportunities. Plus to that, what we see in our particular case, that many investors, in particular, mostly it's family offices, like high net worth individuals, who previously were interested in different sectors, including real estate, hospitality, different luxury businesses. So now they're actually switching their attention towards healthcare, towards preventive medicine, this part of anything what can lead to enhanced immunity. And this is quite interesting, because our focus, for example, previously and now it is artificial intelligence for preventive medicine and longevity, and that's why we do see how these particular segments of healthcare are actually on the rise, in particular on the rise of attention from LPs, from limited partners, from actual investors and owners of.
And is that when you get, say, for example, family offices sort of suddenly paying attention to an area, is that always kind of a positive shift? I guess, money is great for startups, or can it kind of complicate things if you get inexpert investors moving into, especially something like biotech, which is kind of pretty complicated?
Well, I think that in any case, when more more investments will come into biotech field, doesn't matter in what particular segment. This is beneficial, if not for particular investors, but for humanity apparently, because the more will be investments, the sooner people will actually will see practical results. And what is more interesting, that now investors are also, even non particular specialists in biotech, they do understand much better why preventive medicine is so much important, and why it's actually, on the long-term run, it is more interesting rather than just the intermediate, results related, for example, with particular drugs, which are treating one particular disease. Whereas enhancement of immune system, prevention of diseases, is much more strategically interesting.
Great. And obviously, so we touched on biotech, we've touched on kind of digital consultations, health tech covers this like enormous range of things, doesn't it? You talk us through which areas of health tech you are personally kind of most interested in, and also which areas you think we will see kind of a real uptick in investment in the kind of sub-sectors. Noor, do you want to start?
Sure. So we won't look much at biotech and research and kind of trying to cure cancer or COVID for that matter. What we're looking at is more the digital health side. So as we think through the value chain from prevention and wellness, as Dmitry mentioned, which is very important, all the way through the patient journey. So if you're a patient and you're not feeling well, first you look for content, so that would apply any wellness and health content. Then you want to book a doctor, so those platforms are very interesting, and we're quite far behind in our part of the world on developing those. And then alongside that, you obviously have this teleconsultation. I think what becomes very interesting is after that you have EMRs, so electronic medical records. Do those belong to the patient? Do they belong to the provider? How can we engage a patient to own those and to take care of them and make sure that their data around that is secure? And then ultimately, you also have digital pharmacies and the enablement of the patient to actually get the products and the medication they need. So all the way from sick patient to well person, that entire journey is where we're very interested on the patient side. And then you have the provider side. So in terms of making hospitals more efficient in terms of data capture, so less than 30% of hospital visits across Africa end up having records, right? So that's a problem in and of itself. And if we can help hospitals capture that, so we invested in a company called 𝙈𝙤𝙀𝙧𝙯 that does EMR for hospitals as well as a regulator, and then provides that medical record for the patient as well as an enablement for the patient to pay for the treatment that they need if they can't afford it, because that's often the biggest pain point, especially in emerging markets. So when you think about that, you're actually solving a provider problem that touches on the patient. So we look at both the patient value chain as well as the provider solutions and efficiencies that can be captured across hospitals. But we won't look at the deep science in biotech. We leave that to people like Dmitry.
So tell us, Dmitry, apart from what exactly are you kind of interested in?
First of all, I will tell about a little bit about forecasting of technology. So if 5 years ago, digital health and precision medicine was considered as something as next generation, I think in the next 1 to 2 years, it will be hard to find any one health tech company which will not use digital health, data science, and some these basic AI techniques, and it will be just kind of unthinkable. So it will be absolutely outdated. So my point is that apparently digital health, artificial intelligence for precision medicine, with probably some focus on preventive medicine. This is what is will be actually the next big thing in the next several years. Our particular focus just now, it is integration. So let's say the topic which we like the most, it is integration of fintech with health tech, with mHealth, mobile applications integrated with fintech platforms, with insurtech. And during this conference, in the other section, fintech section, they're speaking 𝙋𝙤𝙧𝙩𝙯. It is longevity banking card. So this is the product which we provide seed financing, and now will help them with next stages of growth. So this is longevity marketplace, actually technological integration of different other solutions. We focus on mHealth, so it will integrate multiple other mHealth applications. We'll provide them some financial fintech solutions with some elements of blockchain, some elements of artificial intelligence, and all this will be also integrated with a number of insurtech companies providing more advanced, sophisticated healthcare insurance. There will be several solutions for older people, for middle age people, for younger people. So it will be divided for several particular segments, because apparently for all people there will be also age tech integration. It is technologies for elder care, but integrated with modern IT technology. And this is so we think in health tech there will be like new solutions. By the way, this marketplace will first of all be driven by preventive medicine, providing early stage diagnostic, prognostic, some telemedicine solutions, but with the aim to help users to go to doctor as late as possible. In other words, not to go to clinic as long as possible. So we are thinking this for us at least, it is the most tasty segment just now.
Okay. And in terms of kind of like, it feels like now is the moment for health, for any kind of digital health tech companies, that they've probably got the most, it seems like they've got the most kind of opportunities, the most willingness from politicians, from regulators, from consumers, from medics to kind of get in there. What kind of like, how can they kind of best win over those potential clients or kind of influencers at the moment? And do you have any examples of perhaps how some startups have been kind of making the most of this opportunity that they have, Noor?
Yeah, so there's quite a few actually, and one example is a company that we mentioned called 𝙈𝙤𝙀𝙧𝙯, which has grown very quickly. Another one is a company based in Jordan and is very active in Egypt called 𝙈𝙤𝙀𝙧𝙯, which in Arabic means the doctor. They started as content. They have 20 million visitors a month, of which 16 million are unique. And they've gone from 200 teleconsults a day to 15,000 a day in the last 3 months. So they've really taken advantage by showing how they can create value So somewhere like Egypt, where it's very difficult to get to a doctor, people do want to tell a doctor. And if you can provide that easily within 3 clicks, kind of like how you purchase something on Amazon, right? It should be as easy to get a doctor on your line as it is to buy a product. And so they've really gone down the whole, how can we create value for the patient? How can we be a solution that the patient's looking for? And they've accelerated their growth because of that. I do think it's a hot space, and I think that most investors always want to back companies that are growing very quickly, and now is the right time for these companies because they are growing quickly. But you know, the advice is show how you can create value, show how you're different, show how it's sticky, show how you're solving a real problem, right? And then, you know, once you fund them, they can grow. And that's just one example. Another one that is a bit more technical is an augmented reality platform for hospitals, for operating rooms to work with surgeons and allow surgical collaboration across kind of emerging markets. And now that's suddenly become something that medical device companies want to work with as they launch new devices, because it's harder for surgeons to get from one place to another due to COVID. So as you start to think through kind of how COVID has accelerated the growth of some of these companies, as these companies illustrate value, they will grow faster and they'll get more backing.
Do you think, is it always that simple? I spoke to one German teleconsultation company, and I was expecting this kind of very positive story of all these doctors started using us for video consultations and
No.
it was great and it sorted us forever. And because I guess Germany, the point when I spoke to them, seemed to be kind of managing the situation pretty well, they weren't actually that positive. They kind of thought, oh, well now, you know, we haven't converted a lot of our free customers to paying customers as surgeries reopen. So, you know, my kind of simple narrative was a bit wobbled by that.
Well, specifically on teleconsultation, the way we think of teleconsultation is that it's a feature. We don't even think of it as a product or a company, right? So especially, so for example, in the case of telemedicine's a feature, or teleconsultation is a feature. What their real value add is, again, that patient journey. So they have 20 million, which for the region is a lot, uniques a month on the platform looking for content. They can book, then they can see their doctor, they can hopefully keep their medical records. So teleconsultation is a small part of that journey. But because of that content and because they have so many million viewers on reading that content, they can then offer the doctor a lot of deal flow, if you will, or patient flow, right? Without charging the doctor a subscription fee.
Yeah.
Right? So their customer acquisition costs and their unit economics make a lot of sense because their funnel is really wide because they've been building this content for many years. And now they're actually leveraging that and monetizing that. And doctors are very grateful and it works as a business model. Whereas if you were to come and tell a doctor, you need to subscribe to my platform and pay a monthly fee, and then I'll see if I can get you people, you know, doctors are a lot more reluctant. So I think the companies that have already been doing this for a while and have an edge, and it's not just about teleconsultation, because like I said, anybody can do that at this point in time. It's about what value are you bringing. And so for the doctors, the value is the broader funnel, that those will win because they're already there and they're already ahead of the curve.
Yeah. And what about Dmitry, on the kind of biotech side? How are you seeing companies maybe kind of positively take advantage of this? Maybe also in terms of actually, a thing I come up with, especially when I speak to healthcare companies in the UK, is just obviously we have our National Health Service, and just selling into it is just a bloody nightmare. You know, is that like, has the kind of sales process for these companies got any easier as a result of this? You know,
yes, understood. I will divide this into 2 parts. One them about countries. As we see, different countries have very different ratio of infection from COVID, and also different countries have very different ratio of mortality, in the sense that, you know, for example, in Germany, they succeed to treat almost all the patients. In other countries, it's not as successful. And apparently, the answer lies, you know, in the management of healthcare system and maybe management of other issues in the country. So it's about government technologies, GovTech, integration with health tech. Now, apparently, politicians will ought to be responsible to society in the next years. So they will not, there will be no opportunity for any government, for any country, for, you know, any policymakers in any country to delay solutions in healthcare, some progressive solutions for some next year. So apparently for most of the countries, responsible governments of the countries, it will have to become the priority, and this is good. This is good in general for citizens, and for humanity in general, because this will, of course, help to support progress in healthcare, which is apparently beneficial for everybody. Now, because of that, companies in different countries will have different opportunities. So there will be countries with more opportunities, with better support, with better organized management for that support, with more focus on progress in healthcare, such technologies as, for example, artificial intelligence for preventive medicine, which is actually shall become the forefront, not just AI in healthcare, but AI in preventive medicine, in early stage diagnostic and prevention of different pathologies, which then lead to decline of immune system. And that is, the actual kind of negative leverage, which then can lead to more significant pathologies because of different viruses, even simple viruses, such as flu. So that's why I think there will be countries with great opportunities for startups and, with average opportunities. Now, from my point of view, of course, this challenge with pandemics opens greatest opportunities for, some kind of leapfrog in healthcare and, actual switch from just healthcare to something really progressive, really working more efficiently and a little bit in advance, in the sense of, kind of helping people to stay healthier as long as possible. So we are talking about health longevity because this is the key for, let's say, preventive medicine, health longevity, it's equal terms. And that's my opinion. Anything what lies within digital health, artificial intelligence, and preventive medicine will focus on health longevity. This is now will have greatest opportunities, and this will be recognizable by responsible governments, by reasonable investors, and just by society.
Which countries do you think are good or, offer an interesting example of how they're kind of adopting and rolling out digital health at the moment? Which if I was a startup for whatever reason, sort of didn't know what market to go to, what would be a good kind of promised land?
I can tell where's the current situation is might be considered as the best, but maybe in a year or two it will change. So Singapore is number one, and the reasons are two. They achieved the highest health life expectancy. So their life expectancy is 93, health life expectancy is 89, which is the gap between HALI and DALI, health life expectancy, and disabled life years, only 4 years. In case of UK, for example, it is 10, even 11 years. In US, it's around 11 years. The other point, Singapore can be considered as a smart state and, smart city. And again, they achieved very significant results in prevention of pandemics. So on the other hand, if we consider a small country, but very technologically advanced, we focus on AI and on healthcare, on something progressive technologies, including so digital healthcare. Israel, UK apparently, but UK have other issues because bigger country, and for example, case of London shall be considered a little bit different, for example, with some other parts of the country. So yeah. I would say Singapore, Israel, Switzerland, Germany, UK.
Okay, and Noor?
So I would argue with that. I would say yes, those are the obvious ones, but I think that in emerging markets specifically, we've had some countries recently lead the charge. I mean, and of those, for example, you have Rwanda, where it was stated that every citizen will have access to a teledoctor, right? So I think that what we're going to see is very similar to what we saw in finance over the last 10 years in financial inclusion, which was, 10 years ago, the banking system, 10 years ago, the concept of mobile money or digital wallets or any of those did not exist. Right? And you get to a point where now we can't imagine the world without them, right? Now we're at a point where healthcare inclusion is the priority, as Dmitry mentioned, for so many governments. But it's not about replacing the hospitals. The hospitals aren't sufficient to start with, as I mentioned. Just like it wasn't about replacing the banks, because the banks weren't sufficient back then, right? These people went from cash to digital wallets and mobile money. They leapfrogged completely the banking system. Similarly, we're going to see the leapfrogging of healthcare, right? So we're going to go from people have access to no doctor to people have access to a teledoctor, right? And so when you have countries like Rwanda and governments across the Middle East and in Asia and Africa saying this is now a priority, as Dmitry said, then we get to a point where we'll have people not just thinking outside the box, but people coming in and saying, hold on a second, there is no box, right? So let's just think about how do we create something that's meaningful using technology that exists. So Singapore and Switzerland, these countries are going to do a fantastic job. They have legacy systems and they will improve on those. Where we expect to see exponential changes are in countries that don't have, to start with, the legacy systems and the primary access.
That's really interesting.
Actually, I absolutely agree with Noor on this matter. Just, the question, what type of startups, what type of particular technology they're delivering, but probably what I forgot to mention, I think that all countries of Gulf region, there are 6 countries, they are actually representing the best opportunity for startups if they're somehow already embedded in UK, for example, to also implement their technologies, because governments of those countries we do see like very tangible, very significant, will and support to modernize, to digitalize, to make very tech-driven, innovation-driven healthcare systems in their countries. I'm meaning about United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, amongst that countries.
So Noor, you're kind of talking about there being this opportunity where kind of the infrastructure just doesn't really exist or is inadequate to kind of leapfrog and just create a kind of digital system. How in emerging markets, obviously in Europe and in the US, I feel like there's a lot of talk around things like mental health, also kind of technology for older people, kind of, again, these kind of long-standing issues that societies have had and they haven't kind of tackled them, and they definitely haven't tackled them in a digital way, and people are kind of getting excited about that. How does that play out in emerging markets? Is that focus at all, or are people thinking about that in a different way perhaps?
So that's a great question, and I think in emerging markets people are thinking about how do we give people access to a doctor, right? So it becomes, governments are saying, we have this healthcare crisis, and how do we address this? How do we give people access to a doctor? Right. And so it's not how do we improve it, how do we make it at home? It's the basic fundamental healthcare inclusion issue. So when we think about the leapfrogging and when we think about kind of the opportunities, they go across the board, as you mentioned, from mental health to physical health. Obviously every surgery at the end of the day will require a person, a doctor, in a physical space, but 90% of what gets done can be done remotely, whether it's mental health, whether it's primary care, whether it's, child care. So a lot of that is the space where we expect founders to leapfrog, with the question becoming, what is the M-Pesa of healthcare? So when M-Pesa was invented, right, and created, that was in conjunction, private sector, government, everybody said, we need financial inclusion. Let's think of something novel or new, or how can we leverage our current assets? Digital or mobile penetration is at an all-time high. How do we do that? And now we're seeing the governments and everyone saying, we need healthcare inclusion. We have all these assets. Everyone has access to a phone. There are enough doctors. They're just not in the right place, right? Information isn't where it needs to be. We can collect data. How do we do that? So I think people are coming from a place of, we want healthcare inclusion. We have this list of assets. What can we do? And technology has evolved so much in the last 10 years generally, and specifically in healthcare and data and data privacy, that you could probably do a lot more than we could do 10 years ago. So what are the answers if we're thinking just from here are the assets and here's the purpose, not here's all this legacy in between, how do we use that?
Interesting. Dmitry, when it comes to preventative healthcare, which you've spoken about a bit, I've been thinking about how obviously a lot of governments are in the UK. We now have this kind of battle to tackle obesity because some outrageous percentage of the population is obese. Across Europe, in Paris, you've got kind of a real push towards people kind of using more micromobility, exercising more. How can startups kind of seize on that, or how do you see the kind of preventative stop, helping people become more aware of their own healthcare so they don't need to see a doctor? How do you kind of see that playing out?
First of all, obesity, it's not a disease itself. It is a side effect of metabolic disorders. So people who are obese, most likely, they have quite significant real problems. The root some disorders which leads then as autoimmune reaction or some other causes to obesity. And this is, by the way, why one of the factors prediction of mortality ratio of obese people, it's actually those people have more mortality rate, unfortunately, with COVID pandemics. So, of course, there's quite a lot of techniques, approaches how to analyze obesity and the causes. And actually, it's in case of obesity, it's quite treatable with lifestyle. Now, mobile health applications and applications which can be integrated with actual data science, with precise testing and then high frequency testing. I'm talking about not 1 year, one time per year testing, but one time per month, one time per week, or maybe even in real time, with different wearable devices. So startups which can integrate data science with high frequency testing and diagnostic of what is the cause of obesity, and will be capable to provide quite tangible, precise, personalized recommendations, not just abstract like you need to run or you need to make fitness. It's quite complicated. And with the aim, of course, not to delay these disorders which are leading to obesity to such extent that the people, instead of treating obesity, will have to really treat those more significant diseases already in the clinic.
We're slightly running out of time. I've just got 2 more questions. One is, what do you see as the biggest challenges? It's a big question, kind of still out there for health tech startups. What are the kind of, for any health tech business, the things that they really need to think carefully about and they're mapping out their journey? Noor?
So I think that the journey is either, like I said, a patient journey or a provider technology to make the provider more effective. And I think that as they map out the patient journey, they really need to think carefully about which pain points they're helping the patient tackle. At the end of the day, there needs to be one platform for your health. Just like there's effectively one platform for e-commerce, with the exception of a few things, there's one platform for many different things you do in life, right? There should be one platform for your health where you go, your medical records are there, you can book your doctor, you can get your information. Your health is holistic. We need to stop treating the bits and pieces of the issues that we all face. It's one thing. And so there needs to be one platform. So I think that as founders try to build companies, what's going to be a struggle is really combining all of these under one umbrella. But I think that that's the future.
Do you see that as being a case of lots of kind of mergers and acquisitions, or do you think there'll be a kind of big beast that will, just develop it all themselves?
Well, I'm hoping it's a case of mergers and really thoughtful process behind how do we care for a patient.
Cool. Dmitry, what about you? Big challenges?
We do see one super big challenge for all healthcare system. It is development of precise biomarkers of health longevity, like for preventive medicine, because there are developed thousands of biomarkers for different diseases, but this is already, the late stage and evidence of the disease. For actual delivery of actual healthcare, when we're talking about healthcare and not sick care, healthcare shall be focused on healthy longevity, prevention. For that, required very specific biomarkers which will be capable to predict the emergence of disease, and vice versa, if some particular prevention treatments are applied, that they are actually working. So this is the biggest challenge, and once this challenge will be solved, we can predict that it will be quite sophisticated and robust in 5 years. In 2-3 years from now, there will be already good working MVPs. So at that stage, we'll have actual leapfrog to next stage of actual healthcare rather than sick care.
Okay, all right. To end on a kind of a positive note, what's one thing one thing that's happened during the COVID crisis, one thing that a kind of digital health company has done that you've read about, you've seen, or you've heard about, and you've sort of thought, yes, this is really making the case to governments or to consumers or to skeptics out there, like how can anyone hear this story and not think this is the future? Dmitry?
Well, I don't have just one company in mind, but what I would say that there's a number of companies, approximately 10 of them, which were very successful in applying artificial intelligence, advanced artificial intelligence, such as deep learning, reinforcement learning, to development of vaccines and different treatments for COVID. And we can predict that there will be quite tangible results already till the end of this year.
Great. And Noor?
So for us, I think that Proximie, which is an augmented reality company, just last week was saving lives just virtually by streaming in specialist surgeons into different parts of the world because the surgeons couldn't travel there. So augmented reality working in an operating room in a hospital, at least to me, is novel, and the ability to save lives, whether you're sitting at your desk in Denver or wherever you are as a surgeon, but you're enabling a surgeon somewhere else in the world and saving lives in that manner is really spectacular. So for us, that was one of the light bulb moments, as well as kind of a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, and in positive things coming out of this crisis and this change in mentality towards health.
Amazing. So I think the news seems good. Investments going up, more investors are getting into the space. There's plenty of enormous problems still to tackle in both kind of more developed and also emerging markets. So watch this space. Thank you, Noor. Thank you, Dmitry. Everyone who's listened, enjoy the other panels that you'll be listening into today. I've been Amy Lewin from Sifted. Please sign up to our newsletter. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.